Hey there, youth and youth families, and thanks for inviting me back into your home for this edition of Table Talk. In the next three sessions, I want to share with you some of the things that I think are helpful in developing a family or even a personal devotion time. So if you're doing this by yourself, hey, this I think is still helpful for you too. I do encourage you to try this as a family, but certainly don't neglect trying this yourself if you're on a bit of a solo mission. Conveniently, I've got these 3 points that I'm going to share, and they all start with the letter H. So they should be pretty easy to remember. And so these are the 3 foundations, I think, in terms of starting a personal or a family devotion time. Is the first H that I want to talk about is habit. And this is the part of you that has a sense of commitment or even duty, which isn't always a bad thing. And then the second thing is heart, or you might think of it as desire. And you might be surprised that the shivers and the livers don't always happen as soon as you crack open the Bible. And so this is a part of our development that's prayerfully cultivated. And then finally, there's helps. And like with any activity, some basic skills are really helpful. So we're going to talk about a couple. However, I don't think it's critical that you run out and get like a PhD in stuff. I think you can gain a lot from just digging into Bible study and with some tenacity or some grit. I think we can find things kind of happening in our spirit. So anyway, let's start today with the first H, and that's the one of habit. Have you ever noticed that there's so many things in life that we give up prematurely on? Sometimes success doesn't happen as quickly or as easily as we might like. You know, probably one of the most common stories about this is of a guy named R.U. Darby. And his uncle back in the gold rush times of Colorado. Mr. Darby had had some early successes that motivated him to take a plunge. And so he invested a bunch of money in equipment to start digging for gold. He had staked out a claim and had found some gold early on in the time and then made this investment. And so he starts drilling, starts digging up this property. Weeks go by and he's all of a sudden discovered that his gold source has kind of dried up. So he's feeling pretty defeated, and so what Darby did was he took it and he sold his equipment to a junk dealer, and he abandoned this venture. Now, coincidentally, the junk dealer picked up where he left off, and in fact, he went and he chased some good advice, only to discover that Darby was only 3 feet away from a major gold vein. So the junk dealer hit it mega rich, I guess Darby kind of missed out for just given up a little too soon. Persistence is so important, and it's an important part of developing any good habit. So I'm going to share with you another, maybe more personal story. Here's where you kind of get the deep, dark secrets of Steve Zacharias. Anyway, about a month ago, I realized that I really needed to develop some more healthy habits. I wonder if anyone else out there can relate. I was just hitting a bit of a low spot. Maybe feeling a little angry, overwhelmed, or sad. I don't know what you guys might be feeling. Anyway, it's pretty natural given all the awkwardness of life right now. The trouble is I tend to deal with my emotional stuff with food. And it's not a really great habit for me to have in 2020. Well, anyway, I hit a moment when I really realized that I needed to do something. But I was, because I was not really feeling that well. In fact, it was reminding me of a time when I had to work through some pretty tough anxiety stuff, and my body was definitely giving me some cues that I needed to change a few things in my life. Anyway, what I did was I went back to an app that I had on my phone that I used to track some of the physical things that that I would deal with stress, like things like eating and how I was exercising and having some support. I developed some really good habits, and I got into pretty good shape back in that time, and I felt fantastic. However, about 5 years ago, I kind of dropped the ball with these good habits, and 2020 has been enough to say it's time to get back on the horse. Anyway, so I picked up this app again, and you know what I saw? I saw that over the past 5 years, I have started and stopped dozens of times, mostly because just picking up the old habit and eating was much easier, or I didn't feel like I was getting results fast enough, and so I quit. I was giving up just 3 feet away from striking that gold, just like that RU Darby guy. Anyway, I've heard that it takes about 5 to 6 weeks for a habit to form. And so I'm happy to say that I'm about 5 or 6 weeks into my get healthy sort of renaissance, and I'm feeling awesome. And I wonder if you're willing to commit to a bit of a long-term goal, like a 5 to 6 week sort of start. Physical health is really helpful in feeling good when we're dealing with stress. However, spiritual health is extremely important in becoming who God has designed us to be. You know what all of this reminds me of? And you can check this out in the Bible in Daniel chapter 6, is the story of Daniel. And he's a guy that I just really admire for having some really great spiritual habits. Because Daniel was a God follower, and he really stuck to his guns in some pretty difficult times. He was healthy, and he was committed to God. In fact, he was so much so that the people who opposed him, the people who were jealous of Daniel, they knew that if they were going to mess around with him, it was going to have to be something that got between him and his really good spiritual habits. So they made a law that no one could pray to anyone else other than the king for 30 days, which the king was all too happy to have a law like this put into place. It was pretty flattering that his officials were suggesting such a legislation anyway. He didn't really think through the fact that this was going to really affect one of his favorite sidekicks, Daniel. So when Daniel was confronted by this law, he had to decide whether he was going to stick with his good habits or pray to the king or die. And Daniel chapter 6, verse 10, I'm just going to read it here. I encourage you to read the whole story together, but I'm going to highlight verse 10 here. It says this is what Daniel did. Now, when Daniel learned that the decree had been published, he went to his home, to his upstairs room where the windows opened toward Jerusalem. 3 times a day, he got down on his knees and he prayed, giving thanks to God. And this is the part that I really like. It says, just as he had done before. A big part of our success in our devotional life is simply persisting and doing what could be called good habits in our lives. And just a couple things I want you to think through as a family is, are you willing to make this family devotional time or even a personal devotional time a good habit? I encourage you to, in that, talk about or read the rest of Daniel's story and just explore this. How did his habit turn out for him? Did it cost him his life like the law demanded, or was there a different result? And what was that result? A couple more things to discuss. Habits need consistency to form. So here's a few questions just to think about. What is the goal that you'd like to get to in building this habit? What are you going to sacrifice in order for this habit to thrive? Who will participate in holding us accountable to doing them? Maybe you want to share some of your goals with another family or another person. And I think this is a really important question because we often think of the heavy stuff without thinking about some of the lighter stuff too. What are you going to do to celebrate the accomplishment of developing this good habit that you're going to set out for? Hey, I just want to wish you all a really blessed day. We'd love to hear what you're deciding to do as an individual or as a family. So drop us a line and let us know how you're doing, and we'll catch you later. Bye-bye.